Resume recording. Okay, so here we go. So the truth is that this is the Rambam's. I mentioned in the beginning that the Rambam in the intro to Sefer HaMisvot wrote 14 shorashim, 14 roots or principles for why a mitzvah is gonna be a mitzvah, and this is his real fundamental machloket with the Bahag. This is where it really comes off, and I'm just giving a warning from the outset that the dialogue between the Rambam and the Bahag, and more particularly between the Ramban and the Rambam, is going to be quite, harsh. So, despite the fact that they had great admiration and respect for each other, when the Ramban was defending someone, he did not mince words, and the Rambam, when he was attacking someone, did not mince words. So, you have to just be aware of that and not to be too sensitive. Okay. So the first shoresh, so this is basically how, after the Haktamah, this is the first thing that Rambam says. HaShoresh HaRishon, she'en ra'ui limnot bichlal hazeh hamitzvot shehen midrabanan. We're not counting in our 613 count of mitzvot derabanan. Now you might say, obviously, what's the she'elah? And the fact that you react so instinctively to that already tells us that the Rambam won, basically. The fact that when I tell you, Ner Chanukah, that's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, already tells you, and that there's 613 mitzvot from the Torah, already tells us that the Rambam won this argument, essentially. And like I pointed out in the first shiur, this may be considered the Rambam's most successful work, Sefer HaMisvot, in terms of accomplishing what he wanted. But that's his first line. Daki zeh ha'inyan, most of you know Hebrew already, so I'm not going to translate every line unless it's like really important. If you have a question as to what something means, just call it out. Daki zeh ha'inyan lo haya ra'ui le'orer alav ulva'aro ki achar shehaya lashon ha'talmud 613 mitzvot ne'emru lo Moshe b'Sinai. Ech ne'emar devar shu midrabanan shu mechlal minyan. How could we say that something, the Talmud, this was our first class that we saw. Is it a mitzvah to believe in God, right? The Talmud says 613 commands we heard from Moshe at Sinai. So why, if I were hearing it from Moshe at Sinai, why would I count the mitzvah d'Rabbanan in the 613? So why, the Rambam saying, why did I talk about this if it's so pashut? Mipnei she'ta'u bo rabim, umanu ner Chanukah, umikra Megillah, b'chlal mitzvot aseh, v'chen me'a berakot b'chol yom, v'nichum avelim, u'bikur cholim, u'kvurat metim, v'halbashat arumim, v'chishuv tekufot, right, establishing the calendar, u'shmona asar yom, l'gmor b'hen halel, and the 18 days in the calendar where you have to finish the halel. And he's all saying, that's why I had to say this, because someone counted all these things as separate mitzvot. Tistakel, memishi yishma, Lishonam ne'emru lo Moshe b'Sinai, v'imnei kriyat halel, sheshavach bo David alav shalom. Does it make any sense to say, the Gemara tells me, 613 mitzvot we heard from Moshe, Hashem gave to Moshe at Sinai. And then you're going to tell me it's a mitzvah to say halel that David created? That makes no sense, right? That's question number one on this approach. By the way, the Rambam is pretty much going to go at a consistent argument. It's going to be a pretty standard reductio ad absurdum on every single point. Reductio ad absurdum means take the guy's logic, you go in line with his argument and just say something that is ridiculous, right? You reduce their argument to the point of absurdity. So too here, right? According to you, Moshe heard to read Hallel, which was written by David. Logical absurdity. Right? So what does it mean? Right? And he says, and also does it make sense to say, right, that Hashem told Moshe, by the way, 1,500 years from now, you're going to have to light Hanukkah, right? It's impossible someone would even think such a ridiculous thing. Right? Why did they count it? Because the Gemara says, how could we say Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu? The Gemara is Hechan tzivanu. Where is it written in the Torah? Ve'amru min lo tasur, from the pasuk lo tasur, right? Lo tasur min hadavar asher yigidu lecha yamin u'shmol. V'imitam zeh, says the Rambam, if that's what made them count this, then imitam zeh manu otam hine ra'ui sheimnu kol davar shu midrabanan. כי כל מה שאמרו חכמים לעשותו, וכל מה שהזהירו ממנו, כבר ציווה משה רבנו בסיני, שיסווה לקיימו, והוא אמרו, על פי התורה אשר ירוך, והמשפט אשר יאמרו לך תעשה, והזהירנו מעבור בדבר, מכל מה שתקנו או גזרו, ואמר לא תסור בין הדבר שיגידו לך מן השמאל. Meaning to say, if the reason why you're counting ner Chanukah, Mikra Megillah, is because of the idea of lo tasur, then count every single mitzvah d'Rabbanan, because that's the source for every single mitzvah d'Rabbanan. וימנה כל מה שהוא מדרבנן בכלל תרי"ג מצוות, מפני שהוא נכנס תחת אומרו יתעלה לא תסור, מפני מה מנו בפרט אלו ולא מנו זולתם. Why do he specifically count these mitzvot and not other mitzvot d'Rabbanan? כמו שמנו נר חנוכה מקרא גילאי, היה להם למנות נטילת ידיים, מצוות עירוב, כי הנה אנו מברכים אשר קידשנו מצוות עצמנו על נטילת ידיים ועל מצוות עירוב, כמו שנברך על מקרא מגילה, על להדליק נר חנוכה והכל מדרבנן. Good? I skipped a line, כבר התבהר שכל מה שתקנו הנביאים עליו השלום שעמדו אחר משה, הוא גם כן מדרבנן. This is a very important point because it's not agreed upon by all. Some people hold that things that are in the Nevi'im can also be deoraita, right? But here it's clear that Rambam doesn't hold that lie, right? ובאור אמרו בשעה שתקן שלמה עירובין ידיים נשא בת כה ואמרה חכם בני ושמח ליבי וכו'. ובארו במקומות אחרים שעירוב ודרבנן יקרה. וידיים מדברי סופרים, הנה כבר התבאר, right? שכל מה and importantly, the Bahag didn't count עירוב or נטילת ידיים. And yet it's barur from the Gemarot that those are all Rabbanan. So why is he inconsistent? ואומנם בארתי לך זה, כדי שלא תחשוב שמקרא מגילה, בעבור שהוא תיקון נביאים, יקרא דאורייתא. The only reason why I feel the need to tell you this is because maybe you'll say that since Megillah is in the Nevi'im, right? Well, it's really in the Ketuvim, but it's takanat Nevi'im, that it would be a deoraita. Okay? I'm just going to skip a little bit. And then he says here, v'zeh hu shene'elam mizulatenu, right? And that which the person, yani, is beyond us, umana halbashat arumim, he counted the mitzvah of being malbish someone, giving someone clothing. It's based on the pasuk in Yeshaya, kitere arom v'chisito, v'lo yada, right? V'lo yada ki zed nechnas tachat omro yitale dai machsaro asher yisalo. You don't need that, right? So he's basically pointing out all of these. He's pointing out, be consistent. If you're going to count the Rabbanans, count all of them. And also, Nevi'im stuff doesn't count as a mitzvah. That's all the Rabbanan. So, doesn't matter. Then he has to deal with this statement. This is an important Gemara statement. He says like this. L'shon Gemara Shavuot. Gemara in Shavuot says, "En li ela mitzvot shenistavu al har Sinai mitzvot she'atidin litchadesh kegon makra megillah minayin." How do I know you have to do those? Talmud Amar kimu v'kiblu kimu mashi kiblu kvar. V'hu. So what does this mean according to him? It sounds like even makra megillah is from Har Sinai. V'hu, and says the Rambam. What does that mean? She'yaminu b'chol mitzvah shetiknu hanevi'im v'chachamim achar ken. Right? It means that any mitzvah that the Nevi'im and the Chachamim were mitaken afterwards, like Mikra Megillah, that authority stems from the fact that we had a Brit at Sinai. Good, and then he says you didn't count, not only did you leave out some mitzvot Rabbanan that are mitzvot aseh, like Eruv and Netilat Yadayim, you also didn't count any of the mitzvot lo ta'aseh Rabbanan, right? Don't eat chametz after 4 hours on Erev Pesach. Don't climb a tree on Shabbat. Don't ride a horse on Shabbat. How come he didn't count any of those? And he says, right, here's his point. He says, if you counted all of those, which his logic should dictate that he should, it would end up being thousands and thousands of mitzvot. So where is that line that he says? Right, he says you should count all the shiniyot, all the people that are asur to you, mishum erva midrabanan, right? Not the ones that are listed in the Torah. And he says here, "V'chein haya lehem nimlot b'chal achot chalutza shehi midivrei sofrim," because you counted that. U'b'chalal im nimne kol aseh d'Rabbanan, v'chol lot aseh d'Rabbanan, yeh zeh oleh la'alafim rabim, v'zeh davar mevu'ar. V'aklal ki kol ma shehu d'Rabbanan lo yimne b'chalal tariag mitzvot. Ki aklal azeh hu kulo katuv b'Torah en bo davar d'Rabbanan k'mo shenifa'er. V'omnam hayotam monim k'sat ha'devrim shehem d'Rabbanan ve'ozvim k'satam b'bechira mehem. The fact that they pick and choose which Rabbanans that they want to keep in their count is something that's unacceptable. Amaro misha amaro. It doesn't matter who says it, right? It doesn't matter his reputation. Anyone reading this should have no doubt that we are correct. Obviously, he was incorrect about that. That's what he says here. Now, in the Sefer HaMisvot itself, Mitzvah Taseh 174, he says like this: Mitzvah Kuf Ayin Dal Hishi Sivanu Lishmoa Lebet Din Hagadol V'Lasot Kol Ma Sheyesuva Bo Mi'isur V'Heter. If a mitzvah to listen to the Bet Din Hagadol, ואין הבדל בזה בין הדבר שיסברוהו או הדבר שיוציאו בהיקש מן ההיקשים התורה נדרש בהן, או הדבר שיסכימו עליו שהוא סוד התורה, או לפי עניין מעניינים שיהיה דעתם שהוא ישר ושבו חיזוק לתורה, הכל אנו חייבים לשמוע אותו ולעשותו ולעמוד על פיהם ולא נעבור ממנו. והוא אמר יתעלה על פי התורה שיראוך לשון ספרי ועל משפט שאמרו לך תעשה, זהו מצוות תעשה. כבר יתבארו משפטי מצווה זו בסוף סנהדרין. Clear from the Rambam, when the Sanhedrin talks, you have a mitzvah deoraita or a mitzvah lo ta'aseh to violate. Okay? So that shouldn't be a contradiction. Maybe it is, right, between what he said here and what he said there. But on the surface, we could just be mitaretz very simply. Each individual mitzvah d'Rabbanan is not a mitzvah of the Torah, but the idea of following the Rabbanans is, right? So the fact that you have to do a Rabbanan is a mitzvah deoraita. But the fact that if you don't do a mitzvah Rabbanan, it's a violation of an isur deoraita. No, sorry, I'm screwing up. It's a mitzvah taseh, which means to say it's a bitul mitzvah taseh if you don't do, let's say, eruv, or a better example, if you don't do mikra megillah, right? But you didn't, but it's not you didn't violate any sur, right? That's what the Rambam would say, because there's no mitzvah from the Torah to read mikra megillah.
You could say the difference also is that one you get malkut for, when you don't.
For sure. Definitely. Right? Let's say a guy rides a horse on Shabbat. So he's mivatel mitzvah taseh of what we just read, but he's not violating any sur deoraita lav. He might get makat mardut for right. Okay. So now that's the Rambam. Simply stated, there's the Torah with its laws. There's the interpretation of the Torah. Everything on that level has a status of deoraita. But then there are drabanans, right? So if you're familiar with the 5 categories that he lays out in the Hakdamah of the Mishnah, right? Halakha Moshe Sinai, Perush, and things that were motzi or hutza from the Torah of the 13 midot shel Torah nidresh b'hem, those are all deoraita. Then the second category, gezerot and takanot, are drabanan, and they're fundamentally different status. In fact, there's an isur deoraita, according to the Rambam, for the Bet Din to claim that one of their takanot or gezerot is from the Torah. That's the isur of Bal Tosif, according to the Rambam. In different than Rashi, who says 5 parashiot and tefillin and all that stuff. Maybe that's also Bal Tosif for Rambam, but he adds the layer of, if the Sanhedrin claims that one of their takanot or gezerot is deoraita, that's Bal Tosif. Okay? Now we go into the Ramban, and I got to tell you, the first paragraph of the Ramban, it's a whopper. It's really a whopper, and it's one of those things you could throw out at a party, and you'll get a lot of interesting looks. I know, that's exactly what Isaac came for this class for. So it says the Ramban. So he's opening his book. So he says, B'shmach Rachamana, right? In the name of God. And he quotes the Rambam. Haikar Rishon min Amar Heshiv bo Arav Gadol al Bal Achot Gedolot. And what's his problem? What's his problem with the Bal Achot Gedolot? Because he counted Mikra Megillah and Ner Chanukah. And then he goes and quotes him, Utshuvotav al Teshuvot Gedolot Me'ot, right? And the Teshuvot, the answers to his questions are, and he's saying his Teshuvot are very elaborate and, ki'ilu machrichot lehodot ben, as if we have to agree to him. And we're not, says the Rambam, right? Sorry to spoil it. But what the Ramban is going to do here is brilliant. First, he's going to tell you that he's going on a tangent. But in reality, he's not going on a tangent at all, and it's all going to fit into the big picture. Before I start to talk I have to tell you something. Mashinista pekli. I have a doubt about something. Pashut. Everyone accepts this as a fact, and I don't think it's such. I have a doubt about it. And it's about what is said in Sof Masechet Makot. Darash Rabbi Simlai. We saw this. This was our first class. 613 מצוות נאמרו למשה בסיני, 365 כימות החמה, ו-248 כנגד איבריו של אדם. Famous Gemara, 613 mitzvot we have from Torah, Moshe from Sinai, 365 keneged the days of the solar year, and 248 keneged the limbs of a person. Ve'amar Rav Hamnuna, ma'ikra, Torah tzivalanu Moshe, gematria Torah 611, hechi havu v'yikshu Torah tariyah, ha'anochi v'lo yeh mipi ha'givura shema'anum. You have Anochi and Lo Yeh is 2 plus 611, that's 613. We dealt with that Gemara the first class about whether or not that means the Rambam used that as a proof that Anochi is a mitzvah. But the Ramban says, I have a problem with I have a doubt about the whole idea of 613 to begin with. Right? We grow up hearing 613, 613, 613, says the Ramban. I'm not so sure about that. According to this statement, the Baal Halachot counted mitzvot and made sure that the count came out to 613. And after he did that, it spread out throughout the world, right? Caught like wildfire, 613. It's a pretty catchy number. Huskam ben kol hachachamim v'hatalmidim v'nitparsem be'amon shezeh schum kol hamitzvot. V'nitchaberu b'zeh shirot, piyutim, v'azharot, ne'imeh zemirot. Right? People started writing poems and songs and all these things. Some from Sefarad, Beretz Andalus, as the rabbi mentioned, meaning as Harambam mentioned in the Hakdamah, that he was very upset that people were doing that because he said they mess up the count when they make poems out of it. And he says some in other lands. Okay? Ukvar amar harav shezeh hadavar shelo yisachel oto echad mikol mi shemana mitzvot shezehu minyana. Right? The Rambam himself says that this is, it's foolish, basically. I don't want to get too harsh. Ve'ani be'oni im kol zeh ala b'debi safek al zeh hamemra im hi divrei hakol o yesh ba machloket. He says, I'm not so sure in my poorness, meaning my weakness, as a humble statement, right? I have a safek whether or not this statement of Rabbi Simlai is according to everyone or if there's a machloket. The safek acher im hi halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and whether or not it's even authoritative as halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Kilomar shene'emar l'Moshe pi hagvura kach v'kach mitzvot ani moseh lecha l'savotam b'Yisrael morasha. Or shu asmachta ba'alma min gematria azot. Or is it just a cute gematria asmachta? 613 Torah Sivlan Moshe, or is it actually Hashem told Moshe, listen, giving you 613? It's a magic number. Shezeh HaChacham Rabbi Simlai Adoresh Zeh Matzah HaMitzvot Ken Lefi HaMinyan Shemana Bahem V'Natan Bahem Simanim Ubarav HaMununa Acharav V'Samach Minyan Hazeh L'Gematria Azot. Right? Rabbi Simlai did a count. He went through the Torah, counted all his mitzvot according to his knowledge, right, and rules. And he said, I think there's 613. And then Rav HaMununa comes along and says, that's a cool thing that you said 613 because guess what? I got a nice trick to remember that. Gematria. Right? Maybe it's just that. Why would he think this, says the Rambam? Why not just take the Gemara at face value, 613, have a nice day? Says the Ramban, because when I learn Gemara and I learn Mishnah, really, I have plenty of instances where there's a machloket about whether something is a mitzvah deoraita or not. So what are you going to say? They all agree. They agree 613. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, they agree 613. Except Rabbi Akiva doesn't agree that this is a mitzvah. So he's going to. What does he replace it with? How come no one's discussing these things? And he's going to bring a bunch of examples. Mehem ma shamru b'masechet sotah v'kinet ishto divrei Rabbi Shmuel reshut Rabbi Akiva omer chova. Right? Le'olam bahem ta'avodu. You have to always work the Eved Knani. Rabbi Akiva omer chova. Rabbi Shmuel omer reshut. La yitama reshut Rabbi Akiva omer chova. Hine ladat Rabbi Shmuel. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, you're missing 3 mitzvot. Yachsirun kan 3 mitzvot. V'chen machloket shel havdalat simanim echad chatat ha'of del Rabbanan lo yavdil hulav. It's an isur deoraita to be mavdil the chatat ha'of. Rabbi Azar Rabbi Shimon my lo yavdil and sarich lavdil. You don't have to be mavdil. Okay, I'm just going to skip a little because they're all the same type of examples where you're just proving you have machloket in the Mishnah about what is a mitzvah. It could be an isur, could be a mitzvah, but they're arguing. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to skip a little. Actually, it's the same. He goes with tons of examples. Here we go. Elu v'chayotze bahem l'divrei ha'omer chova hu min ha'minyan shel taryag mitzvot u'divrei ha'omer reshut enan nechshavin v'sarichu lehavi b'minyan ze shel taryag mitzvot acherot k'misparam v'yashlim aseh b'mkom aseh v'lo ta'aseh. Sorry, b'mkom aseh v'lo ta'aseh b'mkom lo ta'aseh b'mkom lav. וצריך שיהיו הדברים מהם שיביאו במניין הזה, אינן מצוות לדברי האומר באלו חובה. And you're going to have to create a situation where they have a machloket. Rabbi Akiva says all three of these are mitzvot. Rabbi Ishmael says they're not. Now, Rabbi Ishmael needs to bring three other mitzvot that are parallel. Aseh, lo ta'aseh, whatever the things are. And they all have to be three new mitzvot that Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold our mitzvot. And every machloket in the Gemara, in the Mishnah that's like this, you're going to have to do all these calisthenics. But when you learn Gemara, you never find this. You never find that they're arguing, oh, you took one out of 613. What are you going to replace it with? They never say this. How come the Gemara never asks, according to the one who counts this as a mitzvot, what does he take out of a mitzvah, or vice versa? According to one who doesn't count it as a mitzvah, what does he put as a mitzvah? We never see these types of questions. So that leads the Ramban, he says, to believe that Rabbi Simlai is an opinion. It's an opinion. He did his own counting. It's the Rabbi Simlai opinion about how many mitzvot there are. And Rav Hamnuna came along and said, that's so cool because I have an asmachta to that. I agree, very nice. Okay. So that's one way to go. Then he says, "V'chen ra'iti yod shenemru bazeh midrashim rabim asmachtot hem tema be'enai shedorshim b'yitziat v'tzitzit zacharta et kol mitzvot Hashem sheminyan tzitzit gematria 600 v'yesh b'tzitzit 8 chutim." Right. So he says, look at the midrash about tzitzit. Tzitzit is gematria. How much?
600.
Isn't it 610? Come on. Easy answer. Shomer.
600.
Why is it 600? It's 610. There's two yods.
90. No, it's 400 plus 100 plus 100. 600.
600, man.
Good. ויש בסיס 8 חוטים, 8 חוטים, ו5 קשרים, 8 חוטים, 5 קשרים, 8 plus 5, Shomer?
13.
Good. 600 plus 13, Shomer?
613.
Wow, look at that. הרי תרי"ג. וזה כתבו רש"י בפירוש התורה. ואין יודע אם אגדה היא. I don't know if this is a midrash, but guess what he says? מכל מקום, אינה מן התורה. Can't be that this is a din Torah, because Bet Hillel omrim bechutin she'enon ela shalosh. You only need 3 strings. So you're missing, right, 3 on each one. So then you miss. ויחסרון להם 2 מן הסימן הזה. והקשרים 5, האח ימיעו בתורה שאין חיובה מן התורה אלא בשני קשים. And the chiyuv for the kisharim is only 2 knots. You don't need to make 5 knots. Fine. Okay, fine. He proves that. So now he says like this. ואולי נאמר שזו הממרה של רבי שמלאי אינה אלא דברי הכל. Sorry, אינה דברי הכל. ויש בה מחלוקת אלא שרבי שמלאי מנע מצוות לפי דעתו וסברתו, ומצען כמספר הזה ויסד בהן הדרשה הזו, ועל כן לא הוגשו ממנו לרבי ישמעאל. Right? It's his own opinion. אבל אף על פי שנביא אותה במחלוקת, נודה שהיא הלכה לפי הסוגיות בתלמוד. He says, even though it's really understood by us to be a machloket, meaning it's an opinion, according from the sugyot of the Talmud, it seems that this number 613 is somewhat agreed upon. כדאיתא כדאמרינן בשבועות ונדרים למה להו קיימו עבודה זרה וכל התורה כולה ינמה 613 מצוות שנאמרו. So you see that number is there. ואנו למדים מזה שזה להם מניינם של מצוות. This is the number of the mitzvot, right? So how exactly they work out the 613? He says it could be everyone has their own count. But they're not going to really ask on it because everyone has their own count. Meaning, Rabbi Simlai is not giving you this is the official count. He's giving you his count. Everyone has their own count, and it's assumed that everyone's count makes sense to them. So you're not going to ask, what do you do with that one? What do you do with that one? Because everyone has their own thing. Okay. Hold on 1 second, because we're not done with the... He says like this. Right? There's a lot of agadot about this number. כמו שאמרו בבראשית רבה, אמר רבי יהודה בר סימון, ראוי היה אדם ראשון שתינתן תורה על ידו, ומה הטעם זה ספר תולדות אדם, אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, יציר כפי, right, my own handwork, ואני נותן לו, I'm not going to give him all the mitzvot, חזר ואמר, 600 נתתי לו, ולא יוכל לעמוד באחת מהן. I gave him 6, he couldn't even hold one. והאח אני נותן לו 248 מצוות תעשה, ו365 מצוות לא תעשה. So you see God himself, quote unquote, in the Midrash, right? 613, he's holding to that count. Okay, we'll skip the next Midrash. Aval, he says, Aval ra'iti b'midrash chazit ribal v'rabanan. Ribal amar shnei dibrot shamu Yisrael m'pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu anochi v'lo yeh. Hadahu dechtiv, nice. Look at that. Responsive, Bar Ilan responsive. So you pay the big bucks for. Hadahu dechtiv. Yishakeni minishit kot piu, right from Shir Shirim. V'lo kol hanishikot. Not all of the kisses, yani the mitzvot. Minishikot piu. Some of them. Right? Meaning, God, you gave us some of them. Not all of them. V'rabanan amre kol dibrot shemu Yisrael m'pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so there's a machloket. Was it just the first two, or was it all of them? Between Rabbanan and Ribal. And Ribal uses as one of his proofs. Where is it? Ribal tafish shitate amar. He said, "Ketiv Torah sivan Moshe kol Torah kula 613 mitzvot havet Torah begematria ola k'minyan tariyah mitzvot." Right? Okay. He brings the Gemara and Makot essentially to justify his opinion. So now the Ramban points out he was one opinion, and the Rabbanan were arguing on him. Shemana Torah sivan Moshe is 613. Hem bekan divrei yachid v'Rabbanan cholkin alav. ולא נתברר שם אם הם חלוקים על הכל לגמרי, כלומר על מדרשו של רבי סמלאי עצמו, שאמר תרי"ג מצוות ניתנו לו למשה בסיני, או שהוא מסורת בידם והכל מודים שכך הוא סכום המצוות. Does everyone agree to the 613? Now he says, ומפני התפשטות החשבון הזה שם, ובכל מקום נאמר שהוא מסור בידם מפי משה רבנו מסיני, ועם כל זה אינם נמנעים ממחלוקתם במצווה מן המצוות, שזה יאמר רשות וזה יאמר חובה, כי יודע אומר רשות שיש מצווה ממלא את החשבון ויקפידו בגמרא לשאול עליה ולמנותה מפני עומק העניין וריחקו שיבערו כל התורה וימנו מצוותיו כמו שאמר בדבר מתנקל מזה ונתי ספר תורה ונאמר לא פקעינה אבל מן הסתם יסמכו על זה המניין כי הוא מקובל בידם. They had some sort of Mesorah that 613 was the tradition. Everyone has their own count. Now we get to the juicy part and why he brought up this entire discussion. Aval. So just to recap before we go. The Ramban is saying this whole concept of there being 613 is not so clear to me. It seems to be that it's a one-person opinion. And it might not be that everyone agrees that there's 613 mitzvot in the Torah. However, he says, from numerous sources, even though I have a lot of questions on this, it does seem to be that there is an agreement that there's some number of 613, but that the 613 itself is not agreed upon because we have a bunch of arguments between rabbis about what's considered a mitzvah, and the Gemara just didn't go into it because basically it would be too tedious and too much time, and it doesn't really, he doesn't say this, but, right, it's too much, basically, is what he said, right? It's too deep. Right? Okay. So now he goes and explains the Baal Halachot Gedolot, who up until now should be, his shita should be preposterous. Count the mitzvah de Rabbanan as one of the 613 mitzvot. And he says like this, Aval Baal Halachot Savur, he holds, Shezo HaMemra v'chol kayotze ba b'mispar hazeh, חשבון כל מצוות הנוהגות בישראל לדורות. ועשו להם סימן כמניין איבריו של אדם וכמניין ימות החמה. ולא הייתה כוונתו של רבי סמלי במאמרה זו, אלא לדרוש מה שהוא משלים עליה, בא דוד והעמידן על 11, בא ישעיה והעמידן על 6, בא חבקוק והעמידן על 1. וכן רב המלונה שמצא לו סמך, I'm going to come back to this, don't worry, שמצא לו סמך, מה קראה, אינו אלא אסמכתא ורמז בעלמא. והרבה פסוקים מלבד זה כתוב בהן תורה ואינם באים בחשבון אותיות. It says like this. The Baal Halachot, what does he hold this 613 represents? Now we agree. Okay, there's a number 613 that has significance with regard to mitzvot. Says the Ramban, you think the 613 means how many mitzvot deoraita we have in the Torah. How many mitzvot are in the Torah? 613. Says the Ramban, that's not what it means, according to the Baal Halachot. The Baal Halachot is counting the 613 mitzvot a Jew has to do. There you go. Mikra Megillah. Michael, you have to read Megillah? Good. Shomer, you have to do Ner Chanukah? Isaac. Yeah, exactly. All right, you have to do all these things. That's what he's counting. He's not. There's no 613 according to the Bag. There's no 613 mitzvot from the Torah. Get that concept out of your head. It's not a thing. There's 613 mitzvot.
You're missing somebody when you asked everybody.
I know. Ruth.
Speak up, Ruth.
No, nothing. Okay.
Bathroom.
Maybe. Thanks for ruining my train of thought, Isaac. Way to go. Way to go.
You gotta get used to it. Morning, say the Rabbi.
No. What is that related to anything? Okay. So that's what the Bahag is counting. He's not counting mitzvot deoraita. He's counting the mitzvot that a person has to do. Now, you should all ask me a question. Edward, we just learned in the Rambam that if he counted all the mitzvot Rabbanan, there would be thousands, right? That's what the Rambam, one of his attacks was. You're going to count all the mitzvot Rabbanan. There's going to be thousands. So the rest of the Rambam is Ramban is basically going to be a double. He's going to be doing two things. He's going to be defending the Bahag with one arm and attacking the Rambam with the other. It's going to be quite the show. So now he says like this. No, where are we going here? Oh no, that's just explaining that thing. Fine. So he's basically saying that the context of that statement in the Gemara is because the continuation is about Ba David v'he'emidan al 11, Ba Yishaya v'he'emidan al 6, Ba Chabakuk v'he'emidan al 1. Basically, they go through and say there were 613 from Moshe. David, again, this is not to be taken literally. David took it and made it 10 Pesukim, not 613, 10 mitzvot, right? And Yishaya came and made it 6, and Chabakuk came and made it 1, meaning to say there's one pasuk in Chabakuk that encapsulates the whole Torah, and there's 6 Pesukim in Yishaya that encapsulates the whole Torah. I think there's another step in there about Micha doing it on 3, but that's fine. So now we could begin to understand the Bahag. The Bahag is saying there are 613 obligatory mitzvot. Now the only thing we have to explain is Hazak Baruch, but now why doesn't he explain all the mitzvot Rabbanan? And if you want to say he only counts the mitzvot Ased Rabbanan, why didn't he count Eruv and Nitilat Yadayim? So now we have to go like this. Omar ki harav heshiva bal achot arbat yeshivot yafot v'tovot me'arerot halevavot u'molidot machshavot la'asher lahem enayim pekuchot ve'oznaim keshuvot. Says the Rambam opened up 4 answers, or 4 it's really like issues with the Bahag. And they're very nice and sweet, and they awaken the heart, and they enlighten the eyes and the ears who are hearing. And these are the 4 things, and now he's going to go through systematically. The first one is going to be the longest by far, but he's going to go systematically knocking them all out. So he says like this. Right? The first thing that Rambam says was, how could you tell me Mikra Megillah is one of the 613 if the Gemara says that the 613 were given to Moshe at Sinai? So now, really, we already answered that question now. Right? According to what the Rambam, that entire introduction here really already answered that pretty swiftly. The First of all, he says the Bahag doesn't even have that in the Gemara. His nusach is, אבל נוסח שלו מצאתי כתוב, דרש רבי שמעון, 613 מצוות נסתוו לישראל. 613 commandments were commanded to Israel, not נאמר לו במשה מסיני, right? והלשון הזה יכלול כל מה שנסתווה אפילו מדרבנן ובמצוות של דבריהם אנו מברכים אשר קידשנו במצוותיו דעת ומכל מקום אפילו לנוסח שכתוב בהם נאמרו למשה מסיני אינו דבר רחוק ונפלא להבין בכלל מיעוט מצוות של דבריהם משלושה טעמים. He says, first of all, according to the nusach of the Bahag, everything works well. It's exactly like I said. He has no problem of counting mitzvot de Rabbanan within the count because it's the 613 that were commanded. It's not the 613 from God, right? That's number one. He says, even if you want to keep the nusach of the Gemara that says that it was said, 613 were said to Moshe, I have three reasons why that doesn't bother me at all. And that if there's a minority of midrabanans that get thrown into the 613, that doesn't really bother me. And here he says like this. Reason number one. And this is a very, 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 all of these are very important, like klalim to know. האחד מפני שהחכמים נוהגים זה תמיד להביא בעניינים של דבריהם לשון תורה לחזק אותם עוד בפסוקי תורה כמו שאמרו מפני מה אמרה תורה נסחו מים בחג. אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא נסחו מים לפניי בחג כדי שיתברכו לכם בגשמי שנה. ואמרו לפניי בראש השנה מלכויות זיכרונות ושופרות דעת. Right? The Chachamim always take their drabanan words, their mitzvot, and then play them back into a dialogue with God or make them for chizuk purposes, right? The Torah doesn't say we have to say malchiyot, zichronot, and shofarot on Rosh Hashanah. And yet there's a dialogue with God telling us, oh, make sure you say this. What do you mean? When did that happen? It never happened in the Torah, right? It didn't have it. It's not in the Torah. Rather, it's clearly a drabanan, and the rabbis are giving it chizuk. So to here, right, these things, these said to Moshe on Sinai, they're drabanans, just chizuk. They're as if they're said to Moshe on Sinai. Don't take them lightly. So if there's 10 drabanans in the count of 613, okay, we called them Ne'emra Moshe on Sinai to give them strength. Fine. V'hasheni, second reason, ki minhag hachachamim b'talmud v'gam b'torah u'b'nevi'im, and this is a very important klal, שלא יחושו להוציא דבר אחד מן הכלל וידברו על הרוב כעניין שכתוב אלה בני יעקב אשר ייוולד לו בפדן ארם יולד לו בפדן ארם והנה חידשה בנימין ולא נולד בפדן ארם. Torah says these are the children that are born to Yaakov and Padan Aram. No, it's not. Binyamin's not part of the count. Okay, there's one guy not missing. No, stop being a stickler, right? Meaning to say, if there's one or two exceptions to the rule, they just throw in the rule. רק על הרוב ידבר, וכן כל הנפש הבאה ליעקב מצרימה 70. Not true. אפרים ומנשה לא באו ליעקב מצרימה, גם יוסף שם היה. Again, כל עד 70, 67, okay, fine. וכן אלה בני עדה ועמלק אינו בנה, right? It includes people who aren't our kids. וכן, ומושב בני ישראל אשר ישבו במצרים 30 שנה ו400 שנה, והם מעת גלות אברהם מארץ כנען בפעם הראשונה, ועומדם בשאר הארצות. It calls it as if they were living in Egypt. They weren't, right? It wasn't. The count started earlier. But they call it as if. Right? So there's plenty of examples here. They leave out 12,000 people. Right? So, ובדברי חכמים רבות בתלמוד, והנה שתי פרשיות בתורה ובהן מצוות רבות. Oh, before we get to that. Good? So that's his second problem. The second thing that's not a problem for him. This next one is very controversial. And he says like this. V'hineh, once we're getting all work, we're trying to, right, it's basically, once you, the Rambam, are getting all worked up that there's stuff in the 613 that's not said to Moshe on Sinai, right, that's the language of the Gemara, shte parashiyot b'Torah, ubehen mitzvot rabot, lo ne'emru leMoshe b'Sinai, ela le'Aharon ne'emru, v'lo b'Sinai. Parashat Shitui Yain, Parashat Mishmarot Kyuna. Now the Rambam would say, like the Ibn Ezra is Mefaresh over there, right? Spoke to Moshe to tell Aharon, right? Meaning there's no way that Aharon is getting the prophecy and not Moshe, right? It's just skipping him, going straight to Aharon. It's a tough perush, but okay. Parashat Shitui and Parashat Mishmarot Kyuna, V'Leviyah Matanot Kyuna, u'mitzvot rabot lo ne'emru b'Sinai, ela b'sha'at ma'aseh, kegon din mekoshesh u'benot zelchad. Benot zelchad wasn't at Sinai. right? It happened in real time. Mikoshesh Etzim wasn't at Sinai. Pesach Sheni wasn't at Sinai, right? So at the end of the day, what are you going to say, Harambam? It doesn't, it's 613, Ne'emra Moshe b'Sinai, don't be so literal, right? So if you're not being so literal about that, don't be such a stickler about the fact that there are mitzvot Rabbanan included in the 613 list. Good. Let's see if we can get to the third. Here we go. כבר הורית לדעת מדברי הרב שהחכמים דורשים במצוות העתידות לחדש שקיבלו אותו עליהם בסיני. Then his last one is basically saying, a lot of times they say that the things that are going to happen in the future happened at Sinai, כי אותה שהזכיר מפרק שבועות הדיינים, לכן מצינו כשביע משה את ישראל, אמר להם, הביאו יודעים שלא על דעתכם אני משביע אתכם, not just swearing you, אלא על דעתי ועל דעת המקום. שנאמר, ולא איתכם לבדכם אנוכי קורא את הברית הזאת ואת העלה הזאת, אין לי אלא מצוות שנסתוו בסיני, מצוות העתידות להתחדש כגון מקרא מגילה מניין, כלומר, מניין שהשביען משה עליהם על דעת המקום ועל דעתו, תלמוד אמר, קיימו קיבלו, meaning to say, דבר מפורש להם שקריאת מגילה מקובלת מסיני ונחרט עליה ברית. Why do we have to read the Megillah? Because the Purim happened. Why do you have to celebrate Purim? Because the Chachamim said it. Why do you have to celebrate? Why do you have to live with the Chachamim? Because Brit Sinai. So that's what it's saying. Kashar mitzvot uba b'shivuah. It's part of our Brit. Al da'at Moshe al da'at hamakom. Im ken lama lo miru aleh aval kayotze bo ne'emru leMoshe b'Sinai. Once you're already saying that, you have to explain that Gemara that way because it says, oh, Mikra Megillah is from Sinai. So once you're already doing those explanations and calling Mikra Megillah Sinai, then why, when it comes to the Gemara and Makot, you're not willing to say that? Good. Fine. We'll continue next time with this diatribe of the Ramban, and then we're going to get his own, his own take, and he's going to really. It's quite a long piece, but it's well worth it, and then we're going to have to hopefully get to defend the Ramban basically. But now the next part is really where the meat and potatoes is, where he's going to attack the Rambam's opinion about mitzvot Rabbanan. He's going to say that this is a contradiction. What we just saw between the two Rambams is essentially a contradiction, and he's going to give his own perush about what lo tasur means and also, the mitzvot aseh and the whole situation. Until next time, in the meantime, everyone should have a wonderful day. Wait, how do I can never.
Exactly.
Right.
Hey, Ruth.
Stop it, Isaac. Stop being annoying.
Okay.
I can't end this. I don't know, guys. So you're going to have to just leave all. I don't know what's going on. Oh, never mind. I got it. Stop share. Stop recording.